The council chamber was silent in the way only ancient power could enforce silence. Not peace. Not respect. Silence born from dominance. Across the vast circular hall, hundreds of alien species observed Earth's final judgment through holographic streams. Humanity's representatives stood alone in the center platform. The arbiter's voice echoed. Species designation, Terra Humanity, assessment complete. The pause. You are unstable, emotional, primitive. You will be removed from the galactic network. No debate. No appeal. Final verdict. Humanity is declared non-compatible with interstellar coexistence. Earth had 24 hours to surrender all weapons and deactivate all military infrastructure, or be erased. On Earth, governments panicked. Military councils argued. Civil systems started collapsing under fear. But deep beneath the surface, something else responded. In a buried facility, older than modern nations, a dormant system activated. A human stepped forward alone. No insignia. No nation. He placed his hand on the console. Protocol. Sovereign contingency. The system replied instantly. Access granted. Deep under the moon, structures that had never been publicly known began to awaken. On Mars, silent industrial cores lit up after centuries of inactivity. Across the solar system, hidden constructs began shifting into alignment. Not new systems. Old ones. Forgotten ones. Earth was not preparing for surrender. It was preparing for war. The human remained still at the console as the buried facility slowly came alive around him. What once felt like a dead structure was now breathing again. Lights running through ancient corridors, sealed systems unlocking in sequence, data streams reappearing after decades of silence. But none of it was new. It was only being restored. Above the surface, the world had already entered panic. Governments tried to interpret the Galactic Council's ultimatum in real time, but interpretation didn't matter anymore. There was no negotiation window. No diplomatic path left. Only time ticking down toward extinction. Yet beneath that chaos, something far older than modern civilization had already begun responding. Deep under the Earth's crust, layers of hidden infrastructure activated without human input. Not military bases in any traditional sense, but something far more precise. Systems built for continuity, not defense. For survival beyond political collapse, beyond planetary instability, beyond species-level crisis. In a forgotten command chamber, the man at the console watched as the first status returns appeared. Lunar grid, waking sequence initiated. Martian infrastructure, partial activation detected. Outer orbital constructs, dormant alignment in progress. He exhaled slowly, as if confirming a memory rather than receiving information. It's all still here, the younger voice behind him said, disbelief breaking through discipline. We thought most of this was dismantled after the unification era. The man didn't turn. It was never dismantled, he replied. Just hidden from people who weren't supposed to carry it anymore. Above Earth, space remained quiet, for now. But that silence was ending. The first anomaly registered near the moon was dismissed as sensor distortion. Then it repeated. Then multiplied. Satellite arrays corrected their readings automatically, only to fail again as something larger began interfering with their assumptions of what the moon actually was. From Earth's perspective, the moon had always been a dead rock. But now, that definition was breaking apart. On the far side of the lunar surface, structures began to separate from terrain that was never truly natural. Massive geometric formations shifted beneath regolith layers that had disguised them for millennia. Panels unfolded silently into vacuum, revealing constructed surfaces that reflected sunlight in unnatural precision. There was no explosion, no dramatic rupture, only revelation, and then movement. Entire sections of lunar crust retracted like mechanical armor, exposing vast platforms embedded beneath the surface. These platforms were not recent. They carried the wear of time, but not decay. They were maintained, preserved, waiting. Power systems ignited without visible source. Energy flowed through conduits that lit up like veins returning circulation to a long-suspended body. In orbit around Earth, alien fleets began to adjust formation patterns. At first, it was subtle. Minor recalculations, defensive spacing adjustments, data verification cycles. Then uncertainty spread, because their sensors were no longer agreeing with each other. Mars was next. Seismic readings spiked across the planet's surface, but not in chaotic patterns. In structured waves, controlled sequences, as if something beneath the crust was following a pre-written activation order. On the red planet's night side, the ground fractured along invisible grid lines. Not random geological failure, but design segmentation. Massive structures rose vertically from beneath the surface, pushing through layers of iron-rich soil that had concealed them for ages. These were not natural formations. They were industrial frameworks of impossible scale. Entire manufacturing complexes activated instantly. No gradual startup. No warm-up period. Instant full capacity. Metal formed itself into components faster than known smelting or fabrication methods should allow. Assembly lines moved without visible operators, guided by automation systems far beyond modern robotics. Ships began to take shape. Not prototypes. Not experimental craft. But finished war vessels designed for conditions that had not yet occurred. Back at the buried Earth Command facility, the younger man finally spoke again. "We're not ready for full deployment," he said. "Not even close. The synchronization gaps alone." "We are not deploying anything," the older man interrupted. A pause followed. "We are reminding." Above Earth, the alien armada completed its entry into the solar system. It was vast beyond human comprehension. Multiple species. Multiple command doctrines. Unified only in purpose, eradication. They formed a structured net around Earth's orbit, tightening gravitational control points, locking trajectories, preparing containment. Their commander issued the final ultimatum broadcast. Final compliance window closed. Planetary sterilization sequence authorized. On Earth, the sky changed. Not visually at first, but perceptually. Satellites began losing alignment. Communication systems experienced cascading interference. Atmospheric sensors detected energy fluctuations that had no natural explanation. And then the moon responded. A single platform aligned itself. Energy built silently, then released. A focused strike crossed the void between celestial bodies with impossible precision. One alien flagship simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed. Erased from detection, matter, and residual signature. A moment of silence passed through the alien fleet. Not fear yet, but recalculation failure. Because this was not supposed to happen. A primitive world was not supposed to have layered defense architecture spanning planetary and lunar systems. And yet here it was. Responding. Above Mars, additional systems came online. Beyond Jupiter, shadow structures began to align. And deep beneath Earth, the buried command chamber displayed full activation cascades across the solar system map. The younger man stared at the readings. "This is only phase activation," he said quietly. "We haven't even triggered outer synchronization yet." The older man nodded once. "That's why they're already losing." Outside, space was no longer quiet. It was becoming a battlefield before the first true shot had even been fired. And humanity had not yet revealed its final layer. It was only opening the door. The alien armada adjusted its formation, but the hesitation had already spread. What should have been a simple containment operation was no longer simple. Their long-range scans were now returning fragmented data, overlapping signals, conflicting readings, and spatial distortions that made Earth's local system appear far more complex than any known pre-spaceflight civilization should possess. At the center of the fleet, command vessels attempted to stabilize interpretation protocols. Their doctrine had always been absolute. Technological inferiority meant predictable resistance. Predictable resistance meant control. But Earth was no longer predictable. And worse, it was structured. On the lunar surface, the platforms that had awakened were now fully active. Massive arrays rotated in silent precision, aligning with orbital vectors that only made sense if the system had been designed with full knowledge of interstellar engagement patterns. On Mars, production did not slow, it accelerated. Entire ship frames were being completed in cycles measured in seconds, not hours. Each vessel emerged fully formed, not assembled piece by piece, but grown into existence through automated fabrication techniques that bypassed known industrial limitations entirely. And then came the first true revelation. Beyond Earth's immediate orbit, hidden in gravitational shadows that conventional mapping had never properly resolved, objects began to move. Not one, not 10, thousands. At first they appeared as debris fields, misclassified, ignored, dismissed by early galactic surveyors. But now they were aligning, forming corridors, opening paths. A fleet that had never been seen because it had never needed to move. Until now. Inside Earth's buried command facility, alarms did not sound. There was no need for panic systems anymore. Everything was already expected. The younger officer stared at the central display. "We're getting full activation signatures from the outer belt," he said. Jovian shadow grid is synchronizing faster than projected. This isn't just defense infrastructure, it's coordinated offense capability. The older man watched quietly. "They're remembering," he said. "Remembering what?" the younger man asked. The answer came after a pause. Why they were built in the first place. Above Earth, the alien fleet finally initiated its first coordinated strike. Energy lances erupted across space, targeting known planetary defense points, attempting to disable surface infrastructure before full activation could complete. Entire waves of weapons crossed orbital distance in synchronized patterns, designed to overwhelm any planetary system in existence. But the response was not defensive. It was preemptive. From the moon's largest platform, a second discharge occurred, not a beam, but a structured energy collapse. Space along a narrow corridor folded for a fraction of a second, and within that distortion, 3 alien warships vanished simultaneously. No explosion followed. Only absence. Confusion rippled through the fleet. Then something even more unexpected happened. From Mars, vessels began to launch. Not in defensive formation. Not scattered. Coordinated. Perfectly timed. They moved through space with trajectories that ignored conventional propulsion logic. No visible thrusters. No energy trails consistent with known drive systems. Just motion, precise, direct, and impossibly fast. The alien commander issued a rapid reassessment order. Identify propulsion source. Unknown. Identify fleet origin. Multiple origins detected: Earth-Moon system, Mars orbital grid, Jovian shadow structures, outer solar perimeter. The report stopped there. Because the system could no longer categorize what it was seeing. The human fleet had fully emerged. And it was not one fleet. It was layers. Earth had not built a single defensive line. It had built an entire ecosystem of war readiness distributed across its entire solar system. Back in the buried command facility, the younger officer took a step back. "This is impossible," he said. "No civilization builds redundancy at this scale. It violates resource logic. It violates historical development models." The older man finally turned slightly. "That's because you're thinking like they think we are," he said. "And what do they think we are?" The older man looked at the holographic projection of the approaching alien fleet. New. A silence followed that felt heavier than anything before it. Above them, space erupted. Human vessels, Mars-forged, lunar-deployed, outer grid synchronized, entered engagement zones simultaneously. Not in chaotic battle lines, but in structured response arcs designed to break enemy formations from multiple angles at once. The alien fleet attempted regrouping. It failed. Every formation adjustment was countered before completion. Every offensive vector was intercepted before full execution. Every retreat corridor collapsed before it could stabilize. It was not a battle of strength. It was a battle of foresight. And humanity had built foresight into infrastructure long before the first alien ship entered the solar system. The alien commander finally issued the most dangerous order of all. Full fleet disengagement. Withdraw from system. But the system did not allow clean withdrawal. Not anymore. Jovian shadow fleets activated. hidden structures beyond Saturn. Synchronized, and Earth's lunar platforms shifted alignment one final time. Inside the command facility, the younger officer looked at the data in silence. "They can't escape," he said quietly. The older man nodded once. "No," he replied, "because they were never meant to arrive safely in the first place." And for the first time since the conflict began, the alien armada realized something fundamental. They were not fighting a defensive species. They were inside a system designed to end invasions entirely, and humanity had not yet deployed its final directive. The alien armada was no longer advancing. It was surviving. What had begun as a disciplined invasion had collapsed into fragmented clusters of ships trying to escape an environment that no longer behaved like open space. Every direction they turned, another layer of human infrastructure responded, not reactively, but in anticipation. It was as if the battlefield had been drawn long before they arrived, and they had simply stepped into it. Across the solar system, human fleets moved with increasing coordination. Lunar platforms adjusted firing arcs in perfect synchronization with Martian ship formations. Jovian shadow units intercepted escape vectors before they fully formed. Outer perimeter systems closed gravitational corridors like invisible gates. The alien command network attempted to consolidate control, but their communication channels were degrading. Not due to jamming in the traditional sense, but due to structural interference. Space itself was being redefined in localized regions, breaking their ability to maintain coherent fleet awareness. Inside one of the flagship command vessels, the admiral stood motionless as reports flooded in. Sector 7 destroyed. Fleet Cluster Theta missing. Jump lanes collapsing system-wide. He turned slowly toward the tactical display. "What are they using?" he asked. No one answered immediately, because the correct answer didn't exist in their doctrine. Finally, a subordinate spoke. "It's not weapons in the conventional sense. It's layered denial infrastructure. Every movement we make is being predicted and nullified before execution completes." The pause. "That's impossible," the admiral said. But even as he spoke, another ship vanished from the formation grid without impact, without explosion, without trace. Only silence where matter had been. Back on Earth, the buried command facility was no longer calm, but it was controlled. The younger officer stared at the holographic solar map. What had once been a distant engagement was now a full system collapse in progress. "They're breaking," he said. The older man watched without emotion. "They were never designed to adapt," he replied. Above Earth, the alien fleet attempted its final coordinated assault. Every remaining vessel converged into a unified strike formation. Energy output across their armada spiked as they committed everything into one overwhelming push, an attempt to break the planetary system through sheer concentrated force. For a brief moment it looked like it might work. Space filled with overlapping energy signatures. Entire sections of orbital defense were targeted simultaneously. The scale of the strike was enough to destabilize most known planetary systems in the galaxy. But Earth did not respond with panic. It responded with completion. From the Moon, every active platform aligned at once. From Mars, all production ceased, not because it failed, but because it was no longer needed. From Jupiter's shadow network, full fleet synchronization locked into final configuration. And deep within Earth's buried system, the final authorization layer activated. The older man placed his hand on the console. "Final directive," he said quietly. A response appeared instantly. "Convergence protocol ready." He exhaled once. "Execute." Across the solar system, something changed. Not visually at first. Structurally. Space began to lose stability along defined boundaries, not collapsing, but being rewritten into controlled segments. The alien armada suddenly found that their positions were no longer relative to each other in a consistent way. Distances changed. Vectors shifted. Escape routes inverted. Their formation, once unified, fragmented into isolated clusters that could no longer coordinate. Panic finally took hold, not emotional but systemic. Their navigation models were failing at the fundamental level. And then the human fleet revealed its final layer. Not a new weapon system, Not a new fleet, but a network that spanned everything already active. Every lunar platform, every Martian vessel, every Jovian shadow unit, every outer solar perimeter node. All of it synchronized into a single operational entity. Not distributed defense, not regional control, but unified execution architecture. The alien admiral finally understood. This isn't a fleet, he said quietly. It's a system. Back in the command facility, the younger officer looked at the final readings. They've lost coordination completely, he said. They can't maintain formation integrity anymore. The older man nodded. Good, he replied. Then Phase 1 is complete. The younger officer hesitated. Phase 1. The older man looked at the collapsing alien formation displayed across the hologram. This was never the war, he said. This was containment. Outside, the alien armada continued to fall apart, not through destruction alone, but through complete loss of operational coherence. Ships drifted into isolation pockets. Communication failed. Navigation systems contradicted themselves. And for the first time since entering the solar system, they stopped acting like an army and started acting like survivors. But Earth had not yet shown them the final layer. And Phase 5 was already waiting. The battlefield had gone quiet in a way that felt unnatural. Not peaceful, just absent of coordination. What remained of the alien armada drifted through broken formation clusters across the solar system, each vessel isolated from the others, each command chain collapsing under conditions they could no longer interpret. Their technology still functioned. Their weapons still existed. But nothing responded with unity anymore. It was as if the universe itself had stopped agreeing with them. Above Earth, the last structured resistance from the alien fleet attempted one final regrouping near the outer orbital boundary. Their remaining commanders tried to re-establish command hierarchy, but every attempt fractured into inconsistent data loops. Even basic positional awareness failed. Inside their flagship, silence had replaced strategy. The admiral stood at the center of a dim command chamber, staring at a projection that no longer reflected reality accurately. Entire fleets appeared and disappeared depending on frame refresh cycles. One of his officers spoke carefully. "We are not being destroyed," he said. A pause followed. "We are being unmade as a coordinated entity." No one corrected him. Because it was true. Far below, on Earth, the buried command facility finally showed calm again. Not because the conflict had ended, but because it had reached completion parameters. The younger officer looked at the system readouts. "All external hostile units are fragmented," he said quietly. "No unified command remaining. No synchronized capability detected. They're scattered across escape vectors. Some are even drifting without navigation control." He looked up. "So it's over?" The older man didn't answer immediately. He watched the solar system display for a long moment. Then he spoke. "No," he said. "This is where it ends." Above Earth's atmosphere, something new began to activate. Not a weapon system in the traditional sense. Not a fleet launch. But a signal architecture. Across every active human installation, Moon, Mars, Jovian shadow network, outer perimeter systems, a single synchronization pulse propagated simultaneously. It did not travel through space like conventional communication. It redefined coordination itself. Every human-controlled unit stopped acting as an independent asset. They became one operational presence. And for the first time, the alien survivors understood what they had been fighting. Not a civilization. Not an empire. A distributed intelligence built across an entire solar system. The admiral's voice broke the silence inside the flagship. "They were never defending Earth," he said slowly. "They were defending all of this." The pause. All of it was already active before we arrived. And then the final layer activated. From every direction at once, controlled collapse protocols engaged, not to destroy remaining alien vessels, but to ensure they could no longer reassemble into anything functional. Space itself became segmented into controlled operational zones. Escape trajectories closed not by force, but by structural impossibility. Every remaining fleet cluster found itself isolated within boundaries that did not physically exist until the moment they were needed. There was no final battle, only final separation. One by one, alien command vessels went silent. Not exploded, not fired upon. Simply disconnected from everything that allowed them to function as part of something larger than themselves. On Earth, the younger officer watched the last readings stabilize. "They're neutralized," he said. The older man nodded once. "Yes." A pause followed. The younger officer hesitated. "Do we recover survivors?" The older man finally looked at him. "That depends," he said, "on whether they can survive being alone." Above Earth, the remaining alien ships drifted in silence across vast distances, each one now aware of something they had never considered before. They had invaded a system that didn't need to fight them to win. It only needed to prevent them from being together. And now, across the broken expanse of space, humanity's hidden architecture slowly powered down non-essential systems. Not because it was exhausted, but because the objective was complete. The solar system returned to stillness. Not the stillness of peace, but the stillness of absolute control. Back in the buried command facility, the younger officer finally spoke again. "What happens now?" he asked. The older man looked at the darkened hologram of the solar system. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he answered. "Now," he said quietly, "we wait to see who else remembers we are here." And somewhere far beyond the edges of mapped space, the galaxy continued moving, unaware that one system had just revealed what it had been hiding all along. Not power, not weapons, but preparation measured in centuries, and patience that had finally reached its end. Silence returned to the solar system. Not the silence of peace, the silence of total control. What remained of the alien armada drifted in broken isolation across vast distances, each vessel cut off from every other, each command structure reduced to fragments of data that no longer agreed with reality. They were still alive, still armed, still capable of destruction. But they were no longer a force. They were just pieces scattered inside a system that no longer allowed them to become whole. Inside the flagship, the admiral stood frozen in front of a tactical display that no longer behaved like a map. Entire fleets appeared, vanished, reappeared in altered positions, as if space itself had stopped respecting their existence. A subordinate finally spoke, voice low. "We didn't lose the battle," he said. The pause. "We lost the ability to be together." No one corrected him, because every system confirmed it. Across the solar system, human-controlled infrastructure began to power down non-critical operations. Lunar platforms dimmed. Martian production slowed. Jovian shadow fleets returned to silent orbit. Outer perimeter nodes ceased active targeting. Not because they were forced to stop, but because they had finished what they were built for. On Earth, deep beneath the surface, the command facility finally fell quiet. The younger officer looked at the final system readouts. "All hostile coordination permanently broken," he said softly. "No regrouping possible. No synchronized fleet structure remaining." He hesitated. "So, it's over." The older man stared at the hologram of the solar system for a long moment. Then he spoke. "No," he said. "This was never the war." The pause. "This was just the warning." The younger officer turned. "A warning for who?" The older man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached forward and deactivated the main display. The solar system faded into darkness. Then he said quietly, "For whoever comes next." Above Earth, the last drifting alien vessel attempted one final transmission. Not a threat. Not a command. Just a question sent into empty space. "What are you?" No response came from Earth. Because Earth didn't answer questions anymore. It only maintained systems. And somewhere deep in that silence, humanity's hidden architecture continued to exist, waiting not for victory, not for peace, but for the next time someone mistook silence for weakness. And that was the real mistake the galaxy would never stop making.